Oh, all right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Let's see. What do we got tonight? Well, we're going to talk about last night, UFC Fight Night 271 slash Adesanya versus Pyfer. You know, it was nice to have a good event. I was cautiously optimistic going in, and you know what? It was a good night of fights. I, I have to give the UFC credit where it's due. Like, that was actually a pretty good night of fights overall. So, what's up? We'll get into detail on that. Then we're going to preview UFC Fight Night 272, which is one of the absolute worst UFC events I have ever seen in my life on paper. I try not to delve into the quasi hyperbolic. There's no hyperbole here, guys. That event on Saturday, it's bad. It's just bad. Now, I'll bury it as much as I can when I get to actually previewing it. There's always the caveat to these things that maybe the action actually is good. That potential always exists. But good, yeah, it's so bad. I don't even think the apologists are out for this one. I mean, that evergreen, Twitter interaction, X interaction, when Mick Maynard, this was like last year, I think, came out and said, okay, don't know why I'm engaging in this discussion, but could you tell me which events have actually been bad? I think our athletes have done a really good job overall. And that gets resurrected every time one of these terrible cards happens, and it gets quote tweeted like, we just watched something terrible. Yeah, it's bad. We're also going to talk about the other combat sports stuff from the weekend. RAF had an event. Sebastian Fundora beat the crap out of Keith Thurman. PFL Pittsburgh went down and was okay. So we're gonna touch on a bunch of different stuff there. And then other news. The MVP Netflix card got announced. We got some UFC pay-per-view numbers, sort of, from the last bit of their time at ESPN. It's like UFC 300 and like 5 events after, I think, give or take. We'll talk about that, other news, and of course, anything you guys might want to talk about. So if you happen to be here live, I go live around. Yeah, this one's actually earlier than usual. It tends to be around 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm trying to work on this, but again, I have to accommodate my living circumstances, and I don't need to disrupt other people as much as I would if I were to record at different points in the day. So if you happen to be up, feel free to leave me a message. Leave a comment. I do see those. So if you have a question that you want addressed and I can't do it live, I'll either get back to you in the form of a comment response or I can address it next week. Happy to do any and all of that. We had a nice one from a couple of weeks ago about the UFC's relationship with its fighters. So I'm there. I do pay attention to what you guys write. So anything you do to interact with the stream, of course, is always appreciated. Drop a like, throw a subscribe, click the bell icon if you want to have some fun. I don't know why YouTube cares about that, but for some reason they pretend to. Anywho, that's what we're going to hit tonight. So let's jump into that, shall we? There we go. UFC Fight Night 271. This is Adesanya versus Pyfer. The UFC was back in Seattle. Good crowd. It was nice to have a crowd that was lively and not just they were partisan, don't get me wrong, but not in the most obnoxious of ways. There have been some obnoxious crowds. And then they're frequently Brazilian, not exclusively, but frequently. And then there's, the crowds that aren't really crowds, that whole bit. But yeah, that was an event. Prediction wise, we had a rougher night here. I'm pissed about at least 2 of these. We went 8-4. There was the one draw. Yeah, I'm okay. What am I annoyed about missing? Well, I switched from Barber to Grasso. The closer we got to that, I rewatched their first fight, and Barber she hasn't addressed the issues with her striking, And she also, while her advantage was in the wrestling, she's not a, I hate to use Khabib every time I say this example, but she's not like recklessly pursuing the takedown. And that's kind of what she needed to do here. And so I swapped that. That felt worse and worse the closer we got to it. Kept fortune. Was there anything else I switched? I don't think I switched anything else. It might have only been that one. Okay, so what did I get wrong? Main event I got wrong. I'm okay with that. My logic picking was sound. My reservations were sound. It was my reservations that just paid off. Belgarwi over Abdul Malik. I'm not mad at getting it wrong, but I forgot how big Belgarwi is. The dude is enormous for middleweight. And mostly that, because like his training footage, a lot. I was sleeping on him, and I have to just eat that. Messiah over Bob Mondays, I'm pissed about, because I picked Bob Mondays, and then the referee just did nothing to enforce the actual rules of the fight. So that one I'm pissed about. Not mad about a little mad at myself picking Fernandez over O'Neal. I don't think I ever would have gotten that right, but I'm a little annoyed with myself. The layoff for O'Neal is another thing that I think would have just like encouraged me not to, but so Belgarwi I probably should have got right if I remembered his physical dimensions. Messiah and Bob Mondes pisses me off because Bob Mondes should have won that, and then the ref just whole other thing. I'll yell about that when I get to it. Then there was the Yanez and Ricky Simone fight, and that one has pissed me off too. How that was scored a draw is first of all, the judge who didn't give Yanez a 10-8 third should have been dragged out of that arena by his heels. Nuts to commentary on that one too, by the way. Cormier and Cruz going, how was that third round a 10-8? Just because he got dropped? Well, they're boxing judges. No, shut up. You're professionals. You should know better than that. He got a 10-8. No, he got hurt earlier. Yeah, he did. He almost finished him. If there's like 5 more seconds in that round, 2 more seconds in that round, Yanez gets a stoppage. Like the 10-8 is not because of the knockdown. The 10-8 is because you were this close to getting stopped. Just shut up. Do better. So that nuts to that judge. Nuts to everyone gave Ricky Simone the first round, and I don't get it. Like Simone has a good final 40 seconds, a minute-ish. But it's not like Yanez is just doing nothing over that time period, and I don't think anything Simone did in that during that stretch overcame the differential that had been built up over the previous 4 minutes. And everybody, just the judges, man, just bad judging on that one. So that one pisses me off for a lot. Like I don't mind. I'm still positive on the event. And they didn't have money riding on any of this. Like this is just my annoyance about the integrity of all this going out the window. Like I can live with being wrong about the main event. I can live with being wrong about Belgari and Abdul Malik. Like I'm okay being wrong. That's part of this when I do this stuff. I'm okay being wrong. I'm less okay when referees are incompetent and judges are not paying attention to anything. That bothers me. So let's not get hang on. The O'Neal and Fernandez one I'm fine being wrong with. Like I can't get mad every time I get something wrong. It's really the Messiah and then the Yanez stuff that one bothers me. Those two bother me a lot. But I'll yell about the fights in particular when I get to them. So that'll be fun. So as I mentioned, 8-4-1 year to date. That gets me to 89-26-1. I am 1 off from having 90 correct in 9 events. I'm a little annoyed. 6, 7, yeah. That's kind of the other reason. Like, it's disrupting the symmetry of my numbers. That bothers me too for purely personal reasons. But that's where we are on the prediction side of things. I'm annoyed about those two just because I'm annoyed by them. So that's where we are. All right, let's get to the fights themselves. Main event. Joe Pyfer defeats Israel Adesanya, former two-time middleweight champion, via TKO. Scoot this over. 418 of the second round. We have Sal here, a little late to the party. You're good, man. We haven't been going that long. We're just getting into the good stuff, so glad you're here. So, this fight, the main event this is the big indicator to me that Adesanya should probably think about hanging him up, like seriously. He had a good first round. His calf kicks were money. He was moving up and down the body. He had some nice body kicks out of southpaw. Pyfer landed a couple of punches, but Pyfer's delivery system is still not great. Then the second round, Izzy comes out and hurts Pyfer a little bit with some punches, then decides to stand in the pocket and trade with him, and that's Pyfer's only real route to success, and you gave it to him for no good reason. The other problem, and this has been noted, it's kind of a thing with some of the city kickboxing guys. When they retreat, they tend to do it in a straight line, and Izzy did some of that here. It led to the part of the finishing sequence. He gets clipped with a left hook while backing straight up. And that's a bad habit, man, at this point. Pyfer is able to kind of tie him up, get him down, moves between mount and back mount frequently, threatens chokes, pounds him out eventually after he gets him belly down and like really flattened out and bowed out. Big win for Pyfer. Got to give him credit. Not super informative about his ability. He didn't show anything new here. He's a pretty big guy for the weight class, not just like height, but like frame wise. He's got power, pretty evidently. He's got physical strength, not just punching power, but some physicality to what he does. I still don't know about his gas tank over a long time. He seemed a little susceptible to some body work. He's still very susceptible to calf kicks because Izzy was chewing him up with those and then just stopped throwing them for some reason. I don't know how many. I don't think I would pick him to beat too many top middleweights at the moment. I mean, let's face it. Izzy was ranked 5 or 6 coming into this, largely based on like tenure, not current accomplishment, because he still hasn't won a fight since he knocked out Poetan, which really was like the big emotional climax of everything about his career. Like to finally get that monkey off his back, to do it in dramatic fashion. Like that's storybook stuff, but where the movie would end and where like every Muhammad Ali movie ends with him beating George Foreman, because that's like, hey, this is great. Like they don't even do the third Frazier fight because they both almost die, or the latter part of his career for good reason, because the emotional climax of his career is regaining the belt from Foreman. Same reason with Foreman. Like if you do a George Foreman story, you stop when he regains the belt after that giant gap, later in his life, because it's tremendous. But you don't keep going about him losing it and some of the sadder fights he took down the stretch. We've seen the pinnacle of the Izzy story, and now it's all downhill, man. I've seen this story before of a lot of fighters, and that's kind of just where we are. I mean, I haven't been doing this as long as anybody else. There's plenty of people. There's people who've been around longer than me, but I've been doing this for a while. I've been writing about the sport and talking about it for like 13 years at this point, give or take. So I've been here around for a bit. This is a long way to say that. I've seen this with fighters. I saw this with Dan Henderson. I saw this with Anderson Silva. I saw it with Robbie Lawler for a while. Like This is just what happens. Like, if you don't get out early, this is what happens to you. Izzy still has a lot of the tools. He took that first round handily. That's not really in dispute. But he couldn't stay disciplined with it. If he'd had another second round like he did in the first, all the way through, he probably gets a third round stoppage because Pyfer at that point kind of falls apart. But couldn't stick to it. The closest analog to this is Anderson Silva. I'm gonna quote Kaposa, Grabaka Hitman, because he said this, and I think it's accurate. Like, I remember the phase of Anderson Silva's career when it didn't even feel like he cared if he won. Like, just something about him wanted to show up and perform. And I feel like that's where Izzy is. And I'm not interested in that. I lived through that with Anderson Silva. Like, I remember him coming back from the leg break. And I understood, like, you don't want the last visual that everyone has is of you getting carted out of that cage screaming in pain because your shin snapped in half. Like, I get wanting to reclaim a little bit of that, but he just kept going after that. And never, like, I don't think he really won again. And I just don't need that. Like, I don't need, that. I don't need what happened to BJ Penn, just hanging around forever and ever. JDS hung around for probably too long. I mean, freaking Stipe stuck around a bit too long. He kind of knew it. I mean, good grief, he looked so bad his last couple of fights, and it's a whole thing. Like, I don't need this. I don't need this phase of Izzy's career. Like, I have a lot of respect for what he did. The number of people who've pulled out the, oh no, Izzy was never all that good. Like, shut up. Just stop. Like, the man is the second most accomplished middleweight champion ever, behind only Anderson Silva, maybe the greatest of all time. Like, no. He was never good. No, he was real good. Oh, but he, had a bunch of split decisions that he should have lost. No. He went to a split decision with Robert Whittaker. Yeah, he also knocked him out in the second round. Oh, the fight with Yoel Romero sucked. Yeah, it did. But it wasn't that complicated a fight to score. Izzy won that fight fair and square. Again, I get it, because presentism is ever a thing in this godforsaken ecosystem, but I'm not going to engage in that. Izzy was one of the best. The number of things he did that made you kind of rethink how you wanted to approach the fight game is non-trivial, and that's how I'm going to choose to remember him when it's all said and done. And the man's been doing this forever. Let's not forget, he's got like 6 pro boxing fights and north of 100 kickboxing fights to go with, 30 MMA fights or whatever he's at. And a little bit over 30. Like, the dude has like north of 200 combat sports fights. Depending on even how many of his kickboxing bouts are accurately recorded, you might have much more than that if you know a whole lot about like the Chinese kickboxing scene. So the fact that he's still this good with all those miles on him is a minor miracle. I don't need to see this phase of his career. But, I'm not in charge of him in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So he's going to do what he's going to do. I just, you got caught by Imavov. There's a little bit of an eye poke, and Imavov is a fairly sophisticated fighter, should be fighting for the belt. You lose into Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer is the worst guy he's ever lost to in MMA, probably most of his kickboxing career too, I would say. I don't think he has too many losses to the kickboxing equivalent of Joe Pyfer. Just put it like that. It's probably about time for him to seriously reconsider. I don't know. Like, he said he's not done. I would like him to be done. If he wants like one more as like make it public, like this is my retirement fight, I could see it. But if he wants to stick around and be part of the, the woodwork, dude, they're gonna make you fight like Belgari or somebody like that who's like it does not get better from here. It just doesn't. Pyfer, he's probably going to wind up fighting somebody near the top. But like I said, I don't know who I would not favor him over Kyle Bahalio, which is actually probably the fight they ought to seriously consider making is Bahalio and Pyfer. But like I don't favor. Have a look actually. What are the middleweight rankings at the moment? These haven't been updated after last night, so I'm kind of just gonna transpose Pyfer into. Here's middleweight. So Izzy was 4th. Good grief. Okay, let's just run this down for a sec. You got Joe Pyfer. I would not favor him to beat Khamzat. I'm going to leave Khamzat out of the discussion. Let's go through the contenders. DDP, Dricus du Plessis. I would favor du Plessis to beat Pyfer. Imavov, I favor Imavov. Strickland, I favor Strickland. Bahalio, I favor Bahalio. Brendan Allen, that's a slightly winnable fight for Pyfer. Fluffy Hernandez, no, Fluffy would beat him. Dude, Gregory Rodriguez might beat Joe Pyfer if they fought. There's a lot of guys there that I think probably beat him. But you beat a ranked guy because the rankings are about tenure, not about current standing anymore. And well, there we are. But not a bad fight and a perfectly serviceable main event. Co-main event, good grief. Alexa Grasso, I mentioned before, I changed my pick from Barber to Grasso after rewatching their first fight. And I owe you guys a little bit more of an explanation about that, so let me go into it. Grasso's recent losing streak is predicated on a couple of things. One, the 2 fights with Valentina Shevchenko, she should have lost that second one. That was not, it was a draw because of terrible judging, which I yelled about when it happened. But then she lost outright in the second one. And then she lost to Natalia Silva. Now, there's a bit of a commonality there that is important to understand. Shevchenko, when they fought the second and third time, even part of the first, which Grasso, got a 5th round submission, that she was going to lose that decision. What Shevchenko did very well to neutralize Grasso's game was kind of twofold. The big one is the most important one for the purposes of talking about why I switched my pick away from Barber is on the feet. Shevchenko controlled most of the distance and the timing and whatnot with kicks. Even though Val is not quite the same athlete that she used to be, she doesn't quite have the same spring in her step, she kicked very, very well, and that really kept Grasso out of boxing range. And then anytime they got closer, it was punch into clinch and then takedown with superior wrestling and superior physicality. That's kind of the Valentina game plan at this point, all the way around. And it's especially potent against Grasso, whose footwork is a little suspect, whose kicking game is almost non-existent. She doesn't throw a lot of kicks. Not none, but very, very few. And once Valentina figured out that she had the pretty serious wrestling advantage on the ground, easy path to victory. Natalia Silva replicated a lot of the first part of that. A lot of kicks, a lot of distance control, a lot of making Grasso do nothing. And then anytime Grasso gets into boxing range, we quickly move into clinching. The common denominator there is a really dynamic kicking game to sort of manage, to score and manage distance. Barber doesn't have that. She's also not, as I mentioned before, a frantic, like relentless wrestler. And that meant she just kind of was going to punch her way in. And that's a bad idea against Alexa Grasso. Grasso has really, really good hands. And that's kind of why I swapped my pick. I was kind of like, Barber's never actually going to get her down. Like, her entries aren't great. And Grasso's footwork still needs work, but like Barber's isn't sophisticated enough to really make her pay for it either. And there's a few things that kind of started ticking over in my head. I did not expect what we got, which was Alexa Grasso knocking out Macy Barber 242 of the first round. One of the most incredible finishing sequences you'll ever see. Grasso starts orthodox. Barber's trying to push her back. Grasso goes southpaw. Barber is clearly not expecting this because she kind of like punches into the pocket. Grasso takes a slight angle, lines up her left hand perfectly, right punch. If you ever want an example of how to properly punch through a target, it looks like that. She doesn't just get here, she goes all the way through, whips the head around. Barber drops to her seat, legs going in opposite directions. Referee starts running over. Grasso then, in incredibly quick fashion, punches her again, punches her with the right hand. Then right hand goes around the neck, full on rear naked choke, rolls, back take. Then the ref gets over and is like, hey, stop, she's already dead. The choke was unnecessary. Like, she was unconscious. She punched her unconscious, and then before the ref got there to stop the action, with again this lightning quickness, dude, Alexa Grasso is not a great grappler on the whole, but she has developed some exceptional back taking and very, very fast choking from there. Just that's how she got Val the first time. Just brief bit of back exposure, jump up, choke, real fast. Most of her submission game and her overall grappling game, like her takedown defense is not the worst thing in the world, but like she's not gonna go, hold for hold and really roll with you. But she has a couple of areas where she has developed. The way this was described, it tends to get described this way a little bit in jiu-jitsu circles. You may not be a black belt overall, but if you have a black belt guillotine, that's what they describe it like. That's a black belt level guillotine. Your overall game may not be enough to get you to get you promoted that much, but that one area, yes, sir, good as anybody. Grasso's back taking and the speed of her choke attacks are exceptional. And Macy was unconscious, so she wasn't fighting it at all. But like, even if Macy's only stunned, that choke is in, and she'd be tapping out immediately anyway. Like, it was that fast. Barber was out for a while. Just laying on her back, eyes open, sleeping with her eyes open, nobody home. I've got a weird relationship with the production decision. See, Macy's laying there, like on her back, arms out, to the eyes open, just there. Again, like sleeping with your eyes open. And the production decides to hold on a shot of her face for about 30 seconds. That's what it felt like. It might have been a little bit less, but it held there for a while, just like she's barely breathing. I don't mean she's like nearly dead. I mean, you can't see a lot of the mechanics of breathing going on. She is clearly breathing, but like it's a weird, like you're used to seeing, big motions from the chest or the nose or the mouth. Like she's just there. She's breathing, but oof. Now, I'm not a squeamish person, as a general rule. I'm okay with showing injuries. I'm okay with showing this stuff on broadcast. Like the Olympics have a thing where, an injury happened. Literally show anything other than what's going on. And I find that annoying. I get it. You don't want to be like super exploitative. Like, look at the pain on this person after their leg got shattered, like Lindsey Vonn. But I kind of want to see what's going on there. And it's a little bit weird that your aversion, like, again, show anything else. This one might have gone just a hair too far the other direction. Like, look at this poor woman unconscious on the ground. Again, just a hair. They at least cut the angle, like at least pick a different camera shot. Like I don't need to stare into her vacant eyes. While like her brain is sort of recalibrating itself. I was fine with it for like 10 seconds, but it felt like they held it a bit too long. Meanwhile, you've got Cormier and Cruz on commentary going, yeah, no, she's okay. She only looks dead. She's okay, folks. Like, no, you don't know that. Neither of you are medical professionals. And I don't mean you can only have an opinion about this if you're a medical professional, but some stuff common sense will apply. But dude, like, you don't know that she's okay. Like you really don't know that, but they had to fill the void of broadcast that was, boy, look at this, look at the aftermath of this carnage. Again, that in and of itself doesn't bother me, but there's just some specific choices that I kind of think could have been handled differently. Put it like that. Yeah, one of the knockouts of the year in all probability. One of the best like female finishing sequences, not just like the punch, but everything that followed. Tremendous. Grosso really, really, really needed that. Yeah, she was on a tough stretch. She hadn't won a fight since she beat Val for the belt. It was like 3 years ago, maybe a little more. Like she hadn't won since then. She had a draw and then 2 losses, and that's tough. I don't know if she's gonna get back to the title picture right away. I mean, Shevchenko and Natalia Silva has to be the next fight. There's nobody else. But Grosso definitely saved her potential title aspirations again with this win. Barber, she's still not even 30. There's still time for her. But, I mean, this is a tough loss. Not an unrecoverable one, but it feels like her game is not as developed as it should be. Like she should have a much better idea at this point of who she is in the cage, what she does, what her paths to victory are, and how to go about it. For some reason, it still feels like she's figuring stuff out. Now, I know she had a bunch of, injury and other health issues, and that's been a big hindrance for her. So it's not like there's no reason for her potentially being where she is, but at the same time, like you've really got to figure this stuff out, especially if you're going to make another serious run towards the top. Next up, welterweight. I want to talk about. Don't know if I want to talk. You know what? Let me save it for the end. There's some stuff from the post-fight presser I want to touch on. I'll talk about Pyfer there. Welterweight next. Michael Chiesa in his retirement fight defeated Nico Price via rear naked choke, 103 of the first. Fairly traditional Chiesa stuff. Bulled close, tried for a Polish throw. They ran into the fence, so he kind of had to then go from his back, wall walk, wrestle up on a single, got back exposure, got the back, got the choke. And Michael Chiesa ends his career without a single TKO victory. Let me double check that because I know he didn't get any in the UFC. I think he didn't get any ever. Yeah, 0 wins by knockout, by TKO or a KO. That's a heck of a stat. Yeah, again, fairly traditional stuff out of Chiesa. Nico Price retired too after the fight. Felt bad for the guy because he's a weird dude, but he's delivered some moments. They gave Chiesa a big send-off. My gripe with this is only as follows. I don't begrudge Michael Chiesa getting a send-off. I kind of begrudge the weird favoritism the UFC shows in this respect. The number of fighters that have not gotten a bunch of this treatment who had like exponentially better careers than Michael Chiesa. Look, Chiesa, by all accounts, seems like a good dude. He's fine on the analyst desk. Like he's a good enough broadcaster. I'm not mad at him about that. I wish him well in that career. I'm never like upset to see him there. Whether I agree with all of his takes or not is immaterial. He's a fairly polished broadcaster. Like that's fine. But there have been some really, really talented fighter. Chiesa was just kind of part of the woodwork. You were never necessarily unhappy to see a Chiesa fight. He had a few duds, but who doesn't? Like the number of people without a dud fight is really, really small. But they gave him this big send off like he was an important figure, and Michael Chiesa was not an important figure in the UFC landscape pretty much ever. Which is not to knock on the guy. The number of people genuinely important to the landscape of a division in the UFC is actually quite small. There was I forget who it was, might have been Cormier and Ben Askren talking about it this week. That, they feel like 80% of the UFC roster is completely replaceable. They're being generous. It's closer to 90, if not more. Like, the vast majority of people on roster for the UFC are completely interchangeable with anyone else of even roughly commensurate skill level. And the UFC is kind of designed it that way, but that's a whole other discussion. More on that later, potentially. But yeah, so again, I wish Chiesa well. He got a win in his home state. It was a feel-good moment, and there's failingly few of those in the sport, so I'm not going to be too mad about it. I just would like to see that same treatment applied to other people more readily. Featherweight next. Good grief. Leon Douglas knocks out Julian Erosa, 333 of the first. This was a whooping. Dude, Douglas's nickname is Gunslinger, and that ain't for nothing. He earned that one. A nice Doc Holliday hat too for that he could wear, that he wore for the post fight. Real tight guard, real good fundamentals. Some nice kicks, a little bit at range. When he opens up, some of his technique goes away. He gets a little bit open with his hands and a little bit more susceptible to counters, something to work on. But when he's not in I'm going to kill you mode, real tight, high guard, smart hands, smart punches. He dropped Erosa 3 times with power jabs. There's ways to get real power out of your jab. A little bit extending the shoulder. Some of it's a little bit what you do with your hip. Again, there's ways to do it. Real power jabs in MMA are kind of a rarity. You tend to get more somewhat either probing setups that are distractions or flicking jabs. Generally, you get more of those. You get stick jabs too, which are kind of similar to probably it's push and then you hold because you're trying to stick something through and then follow up or obstruct as you circle. A lot of different things for that. But again, serious power jabs, like the old boxing adage is you're trying to pound in a railroad spike. George Foreman had a power jab, oomph behind it, and dude, Douglas, that jab of his, power jab, serious oomph behind it. Big thumbs up on that. Big thumbs up. Good finish. Yeah, he looked good. He looked real good. Yusri Belgarawi, defeated Mansour Abdul Malik via TKO, knee, punches, a few other things. 339 of the third. I slept on Belgarawi in the preview for this a little bit. I ain't making that mistake again. Doesn't mean I'm going to pick him in the clear. Doesn't mean I'm going to pick him blind next time or anything, but I am not sleeping on that man again. He's a big middleweight. The dude is 6'6". Long legs. He trains out of, that Glover Teixeira gym. Because he was in there with Poatan. He said after the fact, he was asked, what's next? And he said, well, next is the next real challenge is being Poatan's sparring partner for his heavyweight fight, because that's going to suck. And Pereira was in his corner. They showed him. He got a big pop. So it was funny, but dude, Belgarawi does a lot of what that gym is kind of putting together for a lot of guys, especially kickboxers who come over there to round up their MMA game. It's real simple what they do. Doesn't mean easy, simple and effective. They stuff takedowns. They tear your legs to pieces. And anytime you try to crash distance, they go to the body to help block level changes and to wind you. And a lot of that comes from the jab, like block takedowns, tear you up with calf kicks, strong jabs, break you down, and the finish will materialize. That is simplistic beauty. And if you can do it right, that'll take you a long way. Belgari has a good calf kick. He messed up Abdul Malik with it. His jab worked. Good jabs up and down, like both body and head jabs, like good strong body jabs, maintain distance. And anytime they got close, he pretty good wall walking the few times he did get taken down. Trying to take down a guy with like a clinch who's that big. Dominic Cruz talks about it all the time. Like, it sucks trying to get them down from there. Like, there's a reason Daniel Cormier, when he got to that spot, had like 3 things he did. And mostly these worked because he was at heavyweight. Everyone remembers the big high crotch lift. He does that because he's short, strong, and it removes the like limbs you can try to balance on as much as humanly possible. Big lift and then slam. The other thing he would do is just inside and outside trips. Now that he got away with because he was fighting guys who couldn't wrestle on his level, but look at the guys he hit those trips on. He wasn't hitting those on the like lanky guys. And Abdul Malik was trying to get like body lock throws or lifts. And when you're giving up that much height and length, like trying to grip and then lift and go over, like you're just not going to do it. So he stopped a lot of that. His framing was real good. Anytime they were in the clinch, frame, turn, elbow, knee, punch on the break. Dude, Belgarwi that dude's going to be a problem. He's got a real good frame and he knows how to use it. Appropriate violence, hit that beautiful knee to finally end it. They could have stopped this between rounds 2 and 3. After the second round, like, it was clear that wasn't. First round was a Belgarwi round, but Abdul Malik was in the fight. After that second round, not nearly as much. Eric Nixick, I'll give Nixick credit. He was talking with Abdul Malik in the corner and said, "Hey, are you here? Like, are you here? Because if you're not here, I'm stopping this. If you're not here and you can't win, I'm not going to let you go out there and just get abused." Abdul Malik said whatever he said to go out there and want to go out on his shield, I guess. But if Nixick had stopped this between rounds, I don't think I would not have complained. But, he's also got to maintain his relationship with the fighter, and that can be dicey. But yeah, that third round was just a total drubbing. I still think there's cause for optimism about Mansour Abdul Malik, but dude, Belgarwi that dude is going to mess some people up in that division because he's got a lot of the fundamentals. He's got a lot of the game plan. And if you look at some of the training footage he put out, he's diligent. You can be a very talented fighter, but if you won't do the proper drilling, the proper training for your opponent, it can get away from you. He's got a good team, and he seems very dialed in he knows what he's doing. And that is a winning combination. A good jab and a good calf kick and a degree of intelligence will take you very, very far in this sport because a lot of people who fight here aren't very good. MMA fighters would rather learn and throw more spinning crap than actually like how to jab and circle properly. Kicking off the main card, per usual, Terrence McKinney, not in a long fight. Terrence McKinney defeats Kyle Nelson via TKO, a head kick and punches, 24 seconds of the first round. McKinney just ran him over. Unfortunately for Terrence McKinney, he did not get a bonus. This is ridiculous at this point. Can I just bring this up for Terrence McKinney real fast? I'll spoil that he didn't get a bonus. Terrence McKinney's UFC record is he's been here since 21. He has never been out of the second round. He's only been into the second round twice. Let's just run through this real fast. He knocks out Matt Frevola, chokes out Ferris Ziam, gets knocked out by Drew Dober, chokes out Eric Gonzalez, gets knocked out by Ismail Bonfim, gets choked out by Nazim Sadikov, TKO's Mike Breeden, TKO's Brendan Marat, gets head kicked by Esteban Ribovics. It was a really gnarly head kick, by the way. He TKO's Damir Hadzovic. He chokes out Vyacheslav Borshov. He gets anacondaed by Chris Duncan, and now he knocks out Kyle Nelson. The Bonfim and Sadikov fights went into the second round. Everything else was a first round, win or lose, first round stoppage. This dude should be swimming in bonus money. For some reason, he is not. I mean, you were basically fighting for one bonus at this point because nothing was beating Grosso's. Like, that was getting one. It was just, what's the second one going to be? Yeah, solid win for McKinney. Terrence McKinney is appointment. He is a great TV fighter. I mean that as a compliment. He will probably never be the champion, even contend for a belt. Seems very unlikely. But you are never going to want to miss you are never going to miss a Terrence McKinney fight. You're going to show up and you're going to be entertained. It's probably not going to go very long. There'll be some violence, and that has value, and that's what he's good. And dude, he's out here hurting people. He's good. He's a good fighter. He just chooses to fight in a way that is, he will go out on his sword, man. He will go out. It's not going to happen because of the disparity in ranking and whatnot, but dude, him and Justin Gaethje would be the height of hilarity. So that was your main card. All finishes on the main card. First time that's happened in a minute or two. I think since, what was the official number on that for the main card, all finishes? I usually said it was something like 150 events ago. So, a few years. Yeah. That's, there's a main card again. Very few complaints there. The prelims, on the other hand, well, we got to talk. In the main event of the prelims, Tafik Masayev defeats Ignacio Bahamondes via unanimous decision, 29-28, 29-27, and 30-27. Okay. First round, all Bahamondes. Masayev is in the fight, but Bahamondes fights long, avoids getting, he only gets taken down, I think, like right at the very end. He's landing good combinations. Pretty clear round for him. Second round, he comes out and he floors Masayev with a left hand. Looks to finish. Masayev quad pods, stands facing the fence. Bahamondes grabs him around the waist and looks for a mat return to continue the beating. Masayev blatantly, obviously, grabs the fence. It stops him from getting thrown and potentially hit more. Instead, he kind of, rights himself, turns around, gets a takedown, gets on top, and spends the rest of the round elbowing Ignacio Bahamondes in the head. Cut him open, bloodbath of a fight. One judge gave him a 10-8 for that round, and no. He was never that close to it. He was closer to being finished than he was to getting a finish. Now, I have no problem with him winning that round. He did a lot. He had a lot of control, and he did a lot of damage. His ground and pound is actually very good. Very few people actually have meaningful ground and pound at this point. He does. He also threw a headbutt. Like, he's on top in full guard. He kind of like frames with, I think it was his left, postures himself up, gets, about this much space between them, and then just drops his head onto Bahamondes' head. Just boom. And what does the referee, the adjudicator of the rules, say or do about any of this? Not one word. He says nothing. And then the third round, there's a pretty quick takedown from Masayev. Rest of the round is him on top. A few less fence grabs in the second round, but the whole thing hinges, like, if he gets, pulled away from the fence and kind of like has to roll to his back and try to fight his way up with Bahamondes hitting him the whole time. I think this goes Bahamondes' way. And the ref, dude, if we're not taking points off for headbutts, what the hell are we doing here? Either legalize them or penalize them. But for crying out loud, like, you can't just watch a dude headbutt somebody after he grabs the fence, at least once, and do nothing about it. Like, your job is to get involved at that point. He headbutted the guy. Take a point, man. Good grief. Masayev is kind of a dirty fighter. I mean, he got away with one of the weirdest things. This was in, I can't remember if it was I think it was Bellator at the time. He takes a front kick to the body that actually busts his ribs. And he then looks at the ref. I can't remember if it was Herzog or Peterson, but gets kicked, looks at the ref and goes, "He kicked me in the groin." And the ref goes, "Oh, he must have kicked you in the groin," and pauses the action. Well, no, the kick was incredibly clean. Every camera angle confirms it. Masayev just gets this big break while he reassesses, "Oh boy, my ribs busted from that kick." He completely screwed the other guy. But, yeah. So that fight aggravated the piss out of me, the way it was officiated. Like, ref, man, the notion that the best way to go about officiating is to be as non-interventionist as possible is not accurate. Referees don't want to make themselves the story of the fight. I get it. But by doing nothing, you're making yourself as much a part of the story as if you're doing something. Your job is to enforce the rules. Look, I'm willing to have a discussion about, does the severity of the groin strike matter? There's a lot of factors at play about whether or not that should be a point deduction. Eye pokes, I think, need to be handled more harshly, but at the same time, I do acknowledge that sometimes it just there's ways to go about this. There really are. I'd like to think that we could get on the same page here and say that, a headbutt, an intentional headbutt at that, is a thing that should be actively penalized. If you didn't see it, you're incompetent, because that was not subtle. If you saw it and did nothing, you're a coward. There's no justification for how this went. Like, none. You're either terrible at your job and should not be doing it, or you lack the strength of character and decision making to enforce the rules in any sort of meaningful capacity, in which case you should not be doing the job. Terrible officiating. Absolutely terrible. Would never feel safe with that ref, personally. Never. Lightweight, Lance Gibson Jr., TKOs, Chase Hooper, knees and elbows, 256 of the first. Beautiful elbow to start this whole thing by Lance Gibson. They're coming out of a clinch. He posts with a hand on like the ear of Hooper as he's pushing him away. Hooper's kind of leaning into him because that's what you do when you get pressure like that. And he just goes from pressing here, folds the elbow over. This is a really, really good way to make elbows powerful. You do this for the record. You should do this off your back too. This is how Michael Bisping would cut up people from the back, especially George St. Pierre. Frame. You're on your back, so frame on the face. Push. They're going to lean into you, and then just remove this as a thing they can post on and turn it into an elbow. Just fold it over. So he did that out of the clinch right about here, temple and ear on Chase Hooper. Badly hurt him, never gave him a chance to recover. Hit him with some beautiful knees out of a front headlock position to drop him. Nice win for Gibson. He and his dad now are the first father-son duo in UFC history to both have wins. So that was a good win. Tyrell Fortune defeated Marcin Tybura via unanimous decision. They initially announced this as Tybura winning. Switched to Fortune. It was 229-28 and a 30-27. Fairly generic heavyweight fight. Nothing really to see there. Casey O'Neill knocks out Gabriela Fernandez with punches, 3-11 of the first round. Opposite stances. Southpaw for Fernandez. Entered with kind of a lazy jab. Got check hooked. Just over the top of it. Got hurt, and O'Neill with a really, really nice flurry of blows to finish that off against the fence. I didn't mention this. I didn't mention her name when I talked about this not too long ago, but the number of women who actively engage in like trying to finish a fight instead of just busy work. Casey O'Neill is one of the people who seems more intentional with what she does instead of just doing stuff to do it. Navajo Sterling finally got a finish in the UFC. He TKOs Bruno Lopez 405 of the second. Lopez didn't have a whole lot to offer here. Then at bantamweight, Ricky Simón and Adrian Yanez fight to a majority draw. The scoring in this fight is terrible. All judges gave Simón the first 2 rounds. Now, Simón wins the second round. There's not a lot of controversy there. Yanez should have won the first. Yanez really should have won that first round. He had 4 minutes of good work. And then Simón finally figures a few things out range-wise and sort of what he wants to do with his offense in the last minute. He starts doing, he only really comes alive that last minute, but not enough to have won it for me, but apparently the judges just loved what he was doing. Third round, Simón lands a pretty good punch to start it. Yanez fights his way back into it and then crushes him right near the end of the round. I mean, he beats him up a lot in that round, cuts him open, gives him a pretty bad cut, like on this eyelid, like on the lid, actually, like once they got a better view at it. It was really nasty. His other eye gets busted up and swollen. Should be the other way around. It was this one that was swollen, this one that was cut. Nearly gets a finish in the waning seconds. Enough for a 10-8. Like, this should have been Adrian Yanez's moment to say, my old coach died. I finally am with my new team. I got my feet back under me. I'm back. I'm ready to make a move. And the judges just screwed him out of this one. Like, this was some bullshit. I mean, the one judge not giving him a 10-8 third is terrible. Like, that's objectively terrible. You get that close to being finished with your face that busted up, because it's not like it was just at the very end. Yanez beat him up pretty much that entire round. He got hurt early, but never got dropped. Comes back, again, beats him up, cuts him a few different times, and then puts that barrage on him at the end. This should have been a real restorative performance from Adrian Yanez. And instead it goes down as a draw because terrible. Yanez got screwed there. I do wish if you get to a place where the scores are a draw, if our tiebreaker would be pride rules, just score the fight as a whole. Because if you score this fight as a whole, not hard to score. Yanez wins. I was gutted for him, man. He deserved this win. He really did. It was a rough second fight to sit through. Like, oh, we're in for one of those. And a few fights later, you get Masaev and Bob Mundes, and we're just like, what the hell are we doing here? We kicked everything off with Alexia Tainara defeating Bruno Brazil via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Tainara kept getting Brazil down. Tainara kept working a can opener. She used it to set up elbows, which is a good use for the can opener. If you're not going to get a tap, and you're probably not at this level, I hate to say especially in women's MMA, but especially in women's MMA, you're not going to get a can opener. There's a handful of submissions that actually work best on not just men, but bigger men. Like, you don't see Americanas tapping lightweights. You do see them tapping heavyweights, not just because heavyweights are worse. I mean, they are in general, but there's actually just like more connective tissue in the shoulder and less mobility for a heavyweight than for a lightweight. So that has more of a thing. Sort of ditto stuff like a can opener a mother's milk, that kind of stuff. Like there's just stuff that really works best on heavyweights for physiological reasons. And can openers generally work better under those circumstances, but they're a useful tool for setting up strikes. And that's more what Tainara did here. She get the can opener, really crank it, and then elbow. Not a bad way to go about using it. But if you're fighting someone who actually knows what they're doing off of their back, especially with armbar attacks, you can get in trouble that way. And Bruno Brazil just not good enough to punish it. And that was the card. Like I said, in practice, this turned out to be pretty much the best card the UFC's put together this year. There was a little bit of crap. There was some bizarreness in terms of officiating and judging, but Yanez and Simone was a really good fight. A lot of finishes, a lot of action, good crowd. Very, very little to complain about here apart from judging and that one ref. Other than that, not too much to whine about. Your bonuses. Fight of the night went to Masayev and Bahamondes. I'm more inclined towards Simone and Yanez because less cheating, but I don't think the UFC wants to give that to a draw. Performances went to Alexa Grasso. Again, that was a gimme. And Joe Pyfer. I would not have given that to Pyfer. I would have gone with I would have gone Douglas over Pyfer. To say nothing of Belgarwi. I mean, you were spoiled for choice. Let's be very clear about that. But officially, I might have gone Terrence McKinney just on principle. Pyfer's about fourth on my list of outside of Grasso, who would be the one to get it. He's down a ways for me on this card, but UFC liked Joe Pyfer, so well, here we are. That is the full card. Wanted to say a couple of things about the post-fight presser. Because Joe Pyfer in his post-fight speech, giving glory to God, said, a few weeks ago I almost took my own life and God saved me and God bless. But Cormier going from him saying yeah, I was, suicidal to have a look at what you did in the second round. That you can't leave that one alone, buddy. I get you got a broadcast to get through, but that's the kind of thing that actually does sort of necessitate a follow-up. Now, I hope Pyfer's okay. Look, I'm a Christian. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I'm not going to debate the meaning of Christianity. If any of you feel like that's a hill you want to die on, please don't in this instance. Just live it as... So I believe in the transformative, healing, and restorative power of the atonement of Jesus Christ. It's a very real force in my life. It's a very real force in the universe. So I'm glad he's found God. I really am. But if you're that dark, if you're in that dark a place, finding God is about the most important thing you can do. But there's a lot of work that has to go into that. I hope he's okay. I really do. I mean, we said a few weeks ago, so I don't know how long ago that was. Because colloquially that could mean 3. It could also mean, actually more a month and a half or 2. And you're just phrasing it that way because it feels like weeks or I don't know. But point being, I hope he's okay. I'm very glad he's found Jesus. Whatever his particular denomination winds up being, find some counseling to deal with that, because suicidal ideation is a real thing and can be a real problem. And my gripe with elements of the sort of contemporary therapeutic practice in general, that's a long discussion. But I believe that, things like that are put in place to help us. Whether everyone chooses to use them for their intended good purpose is down to how much you trust your individual therapist, I suppose. But suffice to say, I'm not one of those people who's well, I can just pray away cancer. No, chemotherapy is a, God-given miracle in some respects to try and fight it. So, avail yourself of what's there and maintain faith, because all we can do is always going to fall short. It doesn't mean we don't try. It doesn't mean we don't do it. The Lord loves effort. So put in the effort, but put in the effort is, I suppose, the way to go about that. So hopefully I hope he's okay. Dana White also did one of his Dana White-isms. So last broadcast, they showed a trailer for one of the upcoming events, and some of the imagery, the still images they used, were very, very clearly AI generated. It's not actually AI, but for the sake of conversation, very clearly AI generated, and the vast majority of us let out a collective groan. Like, what are we doing here? So Dana White got asked about this at the post-fight presser, and his response was a pretty typical Dana Whiteism. Like, AI's here. How about you? Who cares? AI's here. How about you shut up and watch the fights? Dana White's response to anything tends to be two things. If you don't like it, don't watch, and shut up and watch the fights. Like, who cares? The fans, your consumers. We care. You have so much freaking money. Look, if my local regional promotion uses uses generative AI technology to help put together a fight poster, because it's handled by like 5 guys operating out of a basement, none of whom are graphic designers, and they want to try that instead of the usual plug and play template, I'm going to cut them a break. I'm not actually anti use of generative technology. I think it's a very, very useful tool as a general rule. It has to be used properly, though, like any good tool. And that ain't it. But point being, I'll cut small promotions a break on some of this stuff. That is cheaper and that is faster. And sometimes, for especially small promotions that are barely, solvent, okay, I'm not going to be mad at you. I wasn't mad at Late Night with the Devil, which used partially generative AI, generative technology for some of the visual effects. Nothing fancy, but they had these old TV title cards for going to commercial break or whatnot. And they wanted to include them, but were short on time. So the director, who was also one of the art directors, used some of that to spin up the basics and then refined it by hand. And that's what they used. And that, to me, is a perfectly acceptable use of this. Anyway, don't want to get on the AI tangent. But UFC has so much money. I'll get a little bit again, I will give a pass to small promotions using some of this technology basically as is, because they're not, well off financially. Okay. I get it. I really do. I'll give you guys a break. You're making $1 billion a year, UFC, just from Paramount Skydance. Of all the fight promoters on all of God's green earth that can afford to pay artists to actually do this, it's you. And instead, you give us AI slop. And I use that term sparingly, because anyone who says that anything AI generated is AI slop is way overgeneralizing. But when all you did clearly was type in a prompt, have something spit out, and then you threw it up on the screen, that's slop. It's slop from the best MMA promotion in the world, allegedly. Certainly the biggest and most successful, because you're reducing your fight promotion to a line item, and that's cheaper. Of all the promotions in all the world that are in a position to not have to worry about spending some money on some of this stuff, it is you. These are the fruits of your labor. These are the rewards you have reaped. And you use it to do nothing beneficial to the fight game, the fight fans, or even really the promotion. And your response by your figurehead, who testified in federal court that he doesn't have a lot to do with any of this, is shut up and consume. Yeah. That's where we are. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about that. That bothered me. So anyway, my full report for UFC Fight Night Adesanya versus Pyfer is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Go give that a read if you are so inclined. I appreciate it. Alrighty. I did not really expect that to take that long, but I guess it did. All right, let's move on to UFC Fight Night 272. This is Moicano versus Duncan. It is this Saturday from the warehouse. This card is ass. This is deep fried ass with a side of ass juice. Like, it is, on paper, one of the worst things I've ever seen. So naturally, we're going to talk about it. Get a couple of things up here. I don't need that. There you are. Okay, yeah, that's it. All right. I'm going to need you too. I mentioned this last week. There's like 6 guys with actual Wikipedia pages. That's it. Was it 6 or was it 8? 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 8. This card is terrible. Main event, Renato Moicano and Chris Duncan. That's a fine enough fight. It's a weak main event. Moicano, let's have a look at what old Money's been up to. 2-fight losing streak. Granted, one of those was a short notice title fight against Islam Makhachev in January. Then in June, he lost a decision to Beneil Dariush. So he's been out for a bit. He was on a good winning streak going into that, again, short notice fight with Makhachev. He finished Brad Riddell, beat Drew Dober, finished Jalen Turner, finished Benoit Saint-Denis. Like, the man was, again, on a pretty decent run. And Duncan is getting his sort of step up here. He's had a good UFC run. Won his debut via split decision, then beat Yanal Ashmuz, lost to Manuel Torres, but Manuel Torres is actually pretty good. He's undefeated since then, 4 wins: Balaji Oki, Jordan Vucenic, Mateusz Rembeszki, and Terrence McKinney. He said, not a bad fight. Actually, this is the best fight on the card, which is kind of sad because it's a weak main event. Where are the odds on this one? Odds are with Duncan. Okay. If this were 3 rounds, I would pick Duncan. Is he gone 5? No. He's had, 1 title fight? Ish? Because that was scheduled for 5. Didn't go 5. Again, if this were 3, I actually would pick Duncan, I think. 5 rounds with Moicano is a long time. Moicano's durable. Never gives up on himself mentally. The mileage on Moicano is adding up. How old is he? 36. Duncan's not a spring chicken. He's 32? Yeah. All right. There's a couple of Chris Duncan fights I got to rewatch before I really lock this in, but for the moment, I will go with him. I'm going to asterisk this one, but I want to rewatch that Rembeshki fight. Not that Moicano and Rembeshki are direct analogs, but I think that's the closest I'm going to get. Co-main event, Virna Jandiroba, this is strawweight, and Tabitha Ricci. Jandiroba's 37. She just coming off that loss to Mackenzie Dern for the vacant belt. She had a good winning streak before that. What, 5? Yeah, Hill, Rodriguez, Lupi, Godinez, Amanda Lemos, and Yan Xiaonan. Ricci does seem to be on a little bit of a run, though. Her only losses in the UFC. At flyweight, she lost to Manon Fiore on short notice, and Ricci is not a flyweight. Her only losses at strawweight, a split decision to Lupi Godinez that could have gone her way, and then a decision to Yan Xiaonan. She's coming off a win over Amanda Hebos. Yeah, she beat up Hebos. Jandiroba can be out-wrestled, and Ricci's a very good grappler. This is Ricci's step up. I mean, she had already had one kind of with Yan, and now they're trying it again. Because, yeah, look, Hebos is allegedly a fun character, but she's not Jandiroba's level as a general rule. Yeah, the odds are very, very close. Basically a pick 'em down the line. Three rounds. Jandiroba can be out-wrestled. If Ricci's dedicated enough to that, because Jandiroba will kind of hang out on her back. Little too confident in her guard game. And against someone like Ricci with the grappling range, I mean, Jandiroba has a good grappling pedigree as well. It's certainly not trying to pretend otherwise. But she doesn't have the same pedigree that Ricci does. Yeah, all right, let me go Ricci. Jandiroba just, yeah, she was just way, way too willing to hang out on back in full guard against Mackenzie Dern. And Ricci, I don't think is good as Ricci's grappling accolades are. They're not quite, Mackenzie Dern's either. But it's a bad look. Because Ricci actually has decent ground and pound, whereas Dern still kind of doesn't. Light heavyweight, Abdul Rahman Yakhayev and Brendan Hiberio. The UFC likes Yakhayev. Hiberio is distinctly unmemorable. Let me double check that, actually. I might be thinking of somebody else. Hiberio is 17-9, won no contest, 2-fight losing streak, 2-4 in the UFC. He lost to Zhang Mingyang, lost to Magomed Gaziasulov, beat Kyle Machado via split decision. He Kimura Dr. Nergozhay. Nergozhay sucks. Lost to Azmat Mirzakhanov, lost to Umar Sy. Yeah, he's losing here. Again, the UFC like Yakhayev. He is 8-0. Known for quick finishes. Has he ever been out of the first round? Once. His second fight got into the... Oh, no, he went the distance once in 23. Okay. Yeah. Just because I'm curious. Oh, yeah. Yakhayev is like a real big minus like 1,400 favorite. Not hard to read the writing on the wall there. All right. Next up, Ethan Ewing and Rafael Estevam. Rafael Estevam, yeah, he's Brazilian. Okay. So Ewing made a little bit of noise when he came in on short notice and beat Wellmaker. Ewing is 9-2, as mentioned, coming off of that upset win, really, over Wellmaker. on a good winning streak. Yeah, he lost his first 2 fights and hasn't lost since. So 9-fight winning streak, very respectable. Estevam, undefeated, 14-0. 3-0 in the UFC. Missed weight twice. Jeez. Missed against Charles Johnson. Beat Jesus Aguilar. Then missed against Felipe Bunes. Was he the reason that I can't remember if it was him or Nascimento who missed weight real bad for that fight? That's a tough one. I want to say Ewing. Oh, that needs to change a little bit. Okay. Odds, yeah, the odds are with Ewing. Well, those previous Estevam fights. Oh, those were at least one of those. Those were flyweight. This is bantamweight debut. Because Ewing fought up at featherweight on short notice. Estevam is moving up. Is this? Yeah, Bunes is okay. So he's being forced to move up. That is an interesting wrinkle there. That actually does make me lean more Ewing, remembering that. More inclined towards Ewing. Hopefully, Estevam looks better at bantamweight though, instead of missing weight more than once. Okay. And kicking off the main card, we have Tommy McMillan and Manolo Zecchini. If you wanted to know anything about those guys, well, let's see what we can do. McMillan is undefeated, 9-0. I believe this is his UFC debut. Yes, it is. Coming off a Contender Series win, a majority decision still got you in. Must have been a good fight. Or, the UFC just is admitting they have no standards. Zecchini, 11-4. Lost his UFC debut. He's been out for a while. Good grief. He lost to Morgan Chartier via body kicks in September of 23. He's been out of action since. Apparently hasn't even had a fight scheduled. Wonder what's kept him out. I got to look into that, actually. The odds really like McMillan, another like minus 1,000 guy. I got to see what's up with Zecchini. I'm going to asterisk this because I want to know why he's been out. Because depending, the reason for him being out that long is actually would actually factor my pick there. But for the moment, I'll go with McMillan. But I got to look into a couple of things there, so bear with me on that one. Heavyweight, God, who cares? Guilherme Pat and Thomas Peterson. Let me check something real fast. Yeah, all right, well, I'm going to assume this bout order, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. Pat, undefeated, 6-0. Peterson, 10-4. Pat won his UFC debut over Alan Fry Jr. Not a super impressive fight, if memory serves. Peterson, 10-4. 2-3 in the UFC. He lost to Jamal Puig. He beat Muhammad Usman. He lost to Shamil Gaziev. He beat Dontel Mays. He lost to Vitor Petrino. Okay. They're kind of kicking the tires on Pat here, it feels like, for a guy only 6-0. Is that pinging my young guy against step into a vet that he's not ready for? That might be, actually. All right. I'll go with Peterson. And this might be very, very wrong. Let's see. Jose Marto Delano and Robert Rushawa. So Delano, 16-3, 4-fight winning streak, UFC debut. I assume that's Rushawa. because he's Polish, and I know that L with that accent is a W, but he's 11-2, lost his debut. Yeah, lost his UFC debut to William Gomez. Tough fight. His only losses are to William Gomez and Saladin Parnasse. He had a good run through KSW. I actually am inclined to pick him here over Delano. What do the odds have? The odds really like Delano. I'm not sure. Dude, minus 400. I would not like him that much. I'm gonna asterisk this one. I hate doing this, but I gotta look up Delano because I need to at least watch his Contender Series fight, which I haven't gotten around to yet. But barring that, like, Rushala is actually pretty good. Let's see. Flyweights, Alessandro Costa and Stuart Nickel. Costa, 14-5. Lost his UFC debut. No, 2-3 in the UFC, excuse me. Let's see. Lost to Amir Albazi. 2022, there's no real shame there. Knocks out Jimmy Flick. That's not difficult. Lost to Steve Erceg. No shame there. Beat Kevin Borjas. Solid win. Lost to Adrian Correa. Or Alden Correa, excuse me. That was a good win by Correa, by the way. So Costa kind of just part of the woodwork here. And Nickel, 8-2. 0-2 in the UFC. Lost to Jesus Aguilar and Luis Rocha. Or Hocha, excuse me. Okay. So these guys are kind of battling to see, does either of us really get to stick around here? Because not a tremendous cause for optimism there. Yeah, the odds like Costa a fair bit, so I'm inclined to agree. At least he's won in the UFC. Nickel hasn't yet. So, Lando Venata versus Darius Flowers. Groovy Lando. He's been out for a minute. What have you been doing, Lando? Dude came with this close to beating Tony Ferguson when Tony Ferguson was the man. Venata is 12-7-2. 2-fight losing streak. Yeah, he has been out. Losses to Charles Jourdain and Daniel Zellhuber. He had fights with Mike Breeden and Hamas Yontop fall out. His last fight, the Zellhuber fight was April of 23, so he's over 2 years. He's going to be over 3 years. Flowers has also not looked all that great. 12-8-1. 0-3 in the UFC? Yes, indeedy. Lost to Jake Matthews, Michael Johnson, Evan Elder. He's been out since July of 24, so both guys have pretty serious layoffs. Obviously, Flowers not as much as Venata, but I was not impressed with anything Darius Flowers brought to bear. I'm going to favor the old dog. I may regret this because I do have a small soft spot for Lando Venata. So, come on. There we go. I'll go with Venata there. Let's see. Haley Cowan and Alice Pereira. No relationship. Dude, Alice Pereira had a terrible last fight. She's 5-1. Yeah, she's coming off of that loss to Montserrat Rendon. That fight sucked. Like, that fight just sucked. The question is if she's legit enough to beat Haley Cowan, 7-4, who's 0-2 in the UFC. She missed weight and then lost to Jamie Lynn Horth. Then she lost to Nora Cornell. Had a rematch with Cornell that fell through. That doesn't make sense. They fought in April. Oh, they were originally scheduled for May, and then the bout got moved to April is what happened. All right, I see what's going on there. This might be Cowan's last shot. I mean, if she can't at least turn in a good performance here, and Pereira just looked terrible. She looked so bad, I'm not going to pick her here. The odds favor her slightly. I ain't doing it. You looked that bad. I am not going to pick you. I'm just not doing it to myself. Middleweight, Azamat Bakoev and Trishan Gore. So Bakoev, he had a good winning streak going, including a good UFC win over Ryan Loder, and then he ran into Yusri Belgarwi October of last year. That did not go his way. I still think fairly highly of him, and Trishan Gore, I don't actually think all that highly of. Gore is 5-4. Overall, 2-4 in the UFC. His only wins are over Josh Fremd and Antonio Trocoli, and Antonio Trocoli sucks. Coming off a loss to Rodolfo Vieira, where he also missed weight. Yeah, that's all more than enough for me to pick Bakoev. Okay. And kicking everything off, Melissa Gatto and Dione Barboza. Gatto 9-2-2. Gone 3-2 in the UFC. She's also been out for a while, yeah? Oh, geez. May of 24. Good grief. She came in with a couple of wins over Victoria Leonardo and Sajara Eubanks, and she lost to Tracy Cortez and Ariane Silva. And she beat Tamaris Vidal. But yeah, that was May of 24, and she's been out of action since then. Huh. Not even a scheduled fight, apparently. I got to look up what's up with that, too. A few of these fighters, there's long layoffs. I got to see why. Barboza, 8-4. 2-2 in the UFC. Beat Ernesta Karskaita, lost to Miranda Maverick. Beat Diana Belbicha, lost to Karini Silva. Barboza's not bad. I'm inclined to favor her just because of the activity, because that layoff for Gatto is not something to be ignored. I'm going to asterisk this one too. I got to see why Gatto has been out. So there's a couple of those actually on this card. Like I need to know why the layoff. But I'm okay picking Barboza at the moment, so we'll go with that. And that is the card. It sucks. Look at that. There's so many people coming off of losses with negative UFC records or with these long layoffs that they're breaking. Oy vey. Not a very good card. We will be I will be covering it though. Saturday, MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Stop by, say hello. Y'all know I appreciate the heck out of you. So, yeah, not great. But let's talk about the other combat sports events of the week. So, Real American Freestyle Wrestling, RAF, had an event, and I kind of dig what they do, for the record. Of note for this, Armin Saryukian had a match a little bit ago with Giorgio Polis. He's kind of like the take me down guy. And that got a little heated at the end. There was an argument of whether or not there was actually a takedown. They had this rematch, and Saryukian handles him and actually does get a pretty big suplex off right in the waning seconds of the fights or the match. So that was okay. Colby Covington tech-falled Dylan Dennis, which is not surprising in the slight. You know the surprising thing about that? That Dennis actually showed up. That's the surprising thing. Everything else, not so much. Yeah, RAF's fun if you like wrestling. So I'm glad they're around, man. I really am. It's nice to see an avenue for amateur wrestling to be pursued. That's long been been missing in this, especially in the United States, where we don't do like the state-sponsored stuff that other countries do for those kinds of athletes. But what it is, PFL had their Pittsburgh card. Not actually a bad card. Let me run through the results of this real fast for you. Main event, Johnny Eblin made short work of Brian Battle. That was entirely foreseeable. Impa Kasanganay got a quick finish. Don't care that much about Ariane De Silva. Who's the other one that was kind of interesting? Josh Fremd's knockout of Yara Silowi was pretty good. Yeah, just not a bad event overall, and it was nice to see something with a little bit of life from the PFL. They're looking at a total rebrand apparently, and that's probably a good idea. The fact that they didn't call themselves like Showtime MMA after they kind of acquired Bellator was, I think, a mistake. And then Anthony Pettis got that, and now they're going to be trying to find some other name because PFL as a brand is definitely damaged. Everyone saying like they should go back to Bellator. No, they absolutely should not. Bellator is a negative equity brand too. So I don't know. Hope they come up with something. I get the camera to work again. There we go. Because we need alternatives to the UFC. We just do. It's better for the fighter. It's better for the consumer. And I think lastly on this sort of tangent, Sebastian Fundora beat the crap out of Keith Thurman. Fundora's kind of been a guy that we've all sort of been waiting for him to really come into his own. He's a big guy for his weight class, real long, real rangy, good infighting for a long guy. He finally seems to be really putting all the pieces together, and you love to see it. So, real good stuff out of Fundora. Thurman had moments, but they were only moments. They were few and far between. Other than that, Fundora kind of took him to the woodshed. So, real good stuff out of Fundora. And that's everything I had there. Okay, let us talk a little bit about the full MVP card for Netflix because they revealed the whole thing. And where are you? I had the whole thing. Where are you? No. Oh, geez, these are listed backwards. Where are you? Why are you making this so difficult to find? There you are. Why are you not? Oy. All right, hang on. I'm going to have to go to someplace else for this. Okay, this might give me what I need. Yeah, this'll do. Okay. So we knew the main event, Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano. We knew Francis Ngannou and Felipe Lins. That's a squash fight, but I'm not going to be mad about it. Nate Diaz and Mike Perry is plenty fun. So the rest of these, some of these were rumored, but let's go through this. Lorenz Larkin versus Jason Jackson. That will be fun. The Monsoon against the ass-kicking machine. What's not to like? Saladin Parnasse and Kenne the Boss Cross. That's actually a very good fight. Saladin Parnasse is a good fighter, and Kenny Cross probably should be in the UFC. Junior Dos Santos is fighting Robelis de Spain. Okay. That's a weird one. I like JDS. I feel he's probably going to get knocked out because he's chinny and washed. But if he wrestles, he might actually be able to win that because Despain's wrestling is terrible. Muhammad Makayev against Adriano Moraes. That's a pretty good fight. Let's see. Namo Fazil and Jake Babian. Whatever. David Morgan and Albert Morales. Alex Pereira's sister, Eileen Pereira. I am convinced that when the UFC saw that Eileen Pereira was on this card, they immediately sent an angry letter to Alice Pereira going, "What are you doing?" Because they don't know the difference. She'll have a fight. Chris Avila is on this card because he's sort of just kind of attached to the Diaz's, and if there's a Diaz fight, then there's going to be a Chris Avila fight. He's not very good. He's fighting Brandon Jenkins, who is also not super good. Let me throw this out. I don't need this. There's a lot going on here. I don't need pretty much anything after the Makayev and Moraes fight. The rest of that is regional level MMA. And that's fine and dandy. I have no problem with regional MMA. It's great in a lot of respects. But I sit through the UFC doing this. I don't need this from MVP. MVP should also not try to do what the UFC does. There is not the infrastructure within them. There is not the appetite for it worldwide. There is not the talent pool to support someone trying to do what the UFC does. Netflix is really only interested in like 3 big events a year. That's the extent to which Netflix is going to be interested in MMA. 3, maybe 4 events a year. That's fine. Here's the thing. That event is going to do very, very large numbers. There's just no 2 ways about that. Ronda Rousey is a borderline historical figure. That event is aimed at lapsed fans and casual fans. And that's the biggest chunk of the audience in any sport, much less MMA. The number of people who kind of stopped watching MMA when Ronda and Conor dropped out of it that will come back for this is very high. That's not an audience the UFC can reach at this point for any number of reasons. But there's rumor that like MVP is now looking at a MMA based reality show, and just guys, don't. That is throwing good money after bad. Reality TV itself at this point is, I'm not going to say dead. It's just so wildly fragmented that the only things really kind of making money are the legacy stuff that's been on forever. The Ultimate Fighter can't get traction. You're only going to do a riff on that in all probability. Unless you look, if you actually have an idea, okay, fine, pursue it. If you're trying to recreate the Ultimate Fighter, don't. That is a waste of your time and your money. It is a waste of everyone's time. There's no appetite for it. There's no appetite for it from the industry leader in this space. There is definitely not going to be any appetite for a tough adjacent property from you. Don't do that. But this is going to probably do more numbers than anything the UFC does all year. It's impossible to actually disrupt the UFC's business model. They have engineered it that way. But you can make a splash with stuff like this, stuff that is fun and stuff that is cool. The UFC is allergic to all things fun and to anything approximating pomp, circumstance, and presentation. They just don't like it for any number of reasons, largely Dana White not liking pro wrestling, I guess. I don't know. There is definitely space in the MMA sphere for stupid fun. And that MVP card kind of ticks most of those boxes. I don't care what Francis Ngannou is going to do after he kills Felipe Lins. Like, oh no, he's going for the MVP heavyweight title. No, he's not. There isn't one. Who cares? I'm going to watch Francis Ngannou kill a guy. I can live with that. That's it. Like, full stop. I don't need a whole lot more than that. And there's space for that in the MMA ecosystem. Like, this isn't quite Fight Circus, but Fight Circus has a place. It's a weird thing to say out loud about something that is with a large degree of self-awareness, marketing and going about its business as a sideshow attraction. But there is space for that. There is space for what MVP is doing here and what Jake Paul and company are doing. And the MMA ecosystem needs it. I really think it does. So we know that full card. The lower end of that card is profoundly uninteresting. But the attraction value of the top end of that card is quite high. Okay, let's talk about this. Yeah, we're gonna go around 2 hours this time. I think you can already see the run timer, so you know if I'm telling the truth or not. But from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer threw out some pay-per-view numbers for kind of the end of the UFC's time with ESPN. Let me pull up what he reported here. Now, here's the thing about Meltzer. Let me read these off, then I'll tell you my thoughts on Meltzer stuff. So here's what he's reporting. UFC 300 did 615,000 buys. UFC 301 did 67,000. UFC 302, 410. UFC 303, 274. UFC 311, 240. And UFC 312, 176. Those are all thousands. Those are pretty bad numbers. Let me do a couple of things here. This comes from Dave Meltzer, and that needs to be understood properly. So let's try to understand. Hang on, I gotta scroll through a bunch of stuff to find the things I wanted to mention about this. We must scroll because that should have been noted differently by me. And I didn't, and that is a failure on my part. Come on. Let's get past all that. Try to get, oh, jeez. Sorry about this, guys. I'm going to get to where I forgot to mention it. Let me talk about this while I scroll. On the Adesanya and Pyfer card, they announced that Demetrius Johnson, the longtime flyweight champion, will be going into the UFC Hall of Fame. Slightly odd timing because DJ came out and said, like somebody asked him about it, he said like, yeah, MVP approached me about doing a fight on Netflix, but I told him I'm retired and I'm not coming out of retirement. So one wonders, if that didn't play a non-trivial part in the UFC's decision. That being said, well, I only bring that up because Demetrius Johnson and the UFC have not always had the best relationship. But it's almost impossible to think of someone more deserving of a spot in the Hall of Fame than Demetrius Johnson. Standard bearer, pound for pound #1 for many years. Never got his flowers from the UFC fan base. which is a bit of a shame. I'm glad he's getting them now. And, that bit of time that DJ spent in one really was kind of his like victory lap where he got to actually like be appreciated. And I'm very, very glad for him. So, okay. Yeah, I think I've kind of found. Yeah, okay, here's some of the stuff I was looking to talk about. Okay, there we go. So, here, let's start with the Dave Meltzer part of this equation. Meltzer reported numbers for the WWE for a long time. He reported UFC numbers for quite a while. Now, when you compare Meltzer's reported numbers with the numbers that we have from the court case documents, because the UFC got sued for their unfair business practices and market suppression, his numbers are never exactly right. He tends to overestimate just a hair. No more than just a hair, right? He tends to overestimate instead of underestimate as a general rule. That said, his numbers are not dead on accurate, but they're pretty reliable is kind of the way to look about it. So I would never like gamble that Dave Meltzer says this did 67,000 buys. Would I, put money on that being the number? No. Would I put money on him being within 15K of the actual buy rate? Probably. I think that's about fair. So understand that these are not like gospel numbers, but they're usually, when I say ballpark, I don't even mean small ballpark. I don't even mean big ballpark. Like he's closer to right than he is way off. So understand, I don't think any of these are exactly accurate, but I do think he's, going to be around what the actual number is. So let's start with those are bad numbers. The UFC stacked UFC 300 as much as they were able to. They overhyped the heck out of it beforehand. And you couldn't do better than what John Jones used to draw on pay-per-view. John was a reliable 5 to 800,000 buys when pay-per-view was a big deal for the UFC. That was your most stacked card right now. Couldn't touch a John Jones who was a middle class pay-per-view seller when the UFC was really big on pay-per-view. I mean, at least one of those is probably the lowest selling pay-per-view of all time. Those numbers are bad pretty much across the board. It's no wonder that the UFC it was not a big deal for them to give up pay-per-view when they left ESPN. ESPN was real pissy about the UFC because towards the end they've been sold a bill of goods. Let's be honest about it. They were sold if you pay the UFC $20 million a pay-per-view, which is what they were doing, then you'll get to keep the money. Any of the buys, basically, is kind of how that worked. It's more complicated than that, but that's kind of how it worked. And on only like 2 of those would ESPN make money. On the rest of those, they're losing money on that proposition. They were kind of sold that the UFC is a pay-per-view powerhouse, and if we put a giant price tag behind the paywall of ESPN Plus, money will follow. And bear in mind, anyone with half a brain could have told you, no, that's not how this is going to work. You're going to take a bath on this, and they did. Badly. I mean, there were plenty of reports that in the last 2 years of the ESPN deal, pay-per-view points didn't matter because no pay-per-views were hitting the thresholds to start kicking in and paying fighters more money. Those are bad. Those are really bad numbers, pretty much across the board. So yeah, the UFC giving up pay-per-view was very. Dude, imagine they had to sell. Just imagine with me for half a second. They had to sell the numbered events that they've put on this year. So that's the Gaethje Patty card. Volk Lopez 2. Is that the last numbered event? I feel like it was. No, Holloway Oliveira 2 was the last one. Okay, so yeah, numbered events this year. Gaethje Pimblett, Volk Lopez 2, Holloway Oliveira 2. Imagine for 1 second the UFC had to sell that for 60, not even 60, they were going to be more. Like $80 a pop. They have to sell you on a card headlined by Volk Lopez 2 with a main card of Benoit Saint-Denis versus Dan Hooker, Mauricio Hufi versus Rafael Fiziev, Teixeira versus Tai Tuivasa, and Quillen Salkild versus Jamie Malarkey. That's worth your $80. I love Volk. $80 for that? In what world? I mean, the Gaethje Pimblett one, you're just selling on Gaethje Pimblett. Like, hey, come watch Justin Gaethje kill somebody. Like, what else was on there? Like, Sean O'Malley and Song Yadong was your co-main event, and O'Malley's not the draw that people think he is. You had Waldo, you had Natalia Silva and Rose Namajunas in a nothing fight. Joan Silva and Aldalen, that was okay. But like, again, try justifying an $80 spend on that card. Holloway and Oliveira. You're selling that on Oliveira and Holloway. That's probably slightly more doable, but I mean, we said at the time, like, that's not a super strong card. It's mostly about if something had happened to that main event, like, I mean, they don't care now, but nothing else on that card was like actually, good on paper. So that's just kind of where we are. And they don't have to try and sell it. They're probably, breathing a sigh of relief about that one. But, that's the UFC used to be a pay-per-view powerhouse. Then it turns out putting an overpriced product, an overexposed product behind an existing, putting a paywall behind a paywall is just a bad idea in general. Who'd have thought? See if there was anything else on that I wanted to mention. Even Grabak Hitman was like, "Oh, so pay-per-view was dead." Looking at those numbers, like, those are just. I remember the heyday of the UFC, man. I really, really do. Again, John Jones was a reliable 500 to 800,000 buys minimum. We all made fun of DJ for being like less than 100K. I mean, the other like kind of bright spot there was 410 for Makhachev and Poirier. Like, that was it. It's just, yeah, just, again, those are only some of the events, but and I would certainly never take Dave Meltzer's word to be binding or, again, 1,000,000% accurate, but generally reliable, I think, is probably the best way to describe some of his numbers on this. And that's kind of borne out over the years. Like, again, dead accurate? No. Reliable? Yes. So now here's the other thing. We're going to find out how accurate he is. The UFC is being sued over this again. They're going to have to pony up the documents again for this time period, and we'll get to compare them to what's being reported, and we'll find out how accurate they're. Again, Meltzer's usually overestimating, but like whatever conversations he has that he puts together those numbers with, once again, not pinpoint accurate, but generally reliable to be, close enough for the most part. So, yeah, the UFC has to be very, very happy with what they wound up getting out of all that. So, yeah, figured we'd talk a little bit about that. And last note, because this is just emblematic of the sort of problems we all have with the UFC these days. The UFC announced Manel Kape versus Kyoji Horiguchi, which is fine. Their first fight is actually a really fun fight. I'm sure this one will be good. But where do you think the UFC has decided to put this very, very relevant flyweight fight between two top contenders? This probably determines the next title challenger, depending on how fast Pantoja gets back and what exactly happens with Van and Tyra. These two fought in the Saitama Super Arena in front of 17,000 people the last time they fought in a big production. And their rematch, ladies and gentlemen, is in the warehouse. Look, I know there's Apex apologists. And you know what? I'll be fair to the Apex. There are things about it that maybe aren't the worst thing in the world. That's really true. As a general rule, the atmosphere is not as bad as it used to be. It used to be terrible. It's tolerable, mostly. Kind of annoying still, but tolerable. But this is supposed to be like the next guy at flyweight, the next challenger at flyweight. You can't build this division or any division in the warehouse. That is not what you should be doing there. The crap you're giving us this Saturday, fine. Warehouse fights, knock yourselves out. Anything that matters, how are you not taking this somewhere? Anywhere. Especially go someplace with a decent Portuguese population. Go someplace with a decent Japanese population. If you want to keep it stateside, take it to Japan, where these two are actually kind of well known. Horiguchi especially, but Manel Kape's rise to fame came over there too. And we're sticking them in the frickin' warehouse in front of 100 drunk fans. Ugh. Those two deserve better. This division deserves better. And the UFC makes it very, very easy to be very, very disillusioned with everything they do these days, doesn't they? Don't they? All right. Well, on that note, a little depressing. Yeah, we've crossed the 2-hour mark. Let me check the old social media, see if anything new is broken while I've been yapping. If not, I will do some plugs and get out of here. So, let's see. Nothing on that. Yeah, there was some quality violence all weekend. A lot of regional stuff, and God bless Combat Sports, Twitter/X for keeping it alive and in the public consciousness. If you know how to, if you know how to find it and know who to follow. But yeah, I think I don't think I'm getting anything new there. Yeah, I do think we're going to just kind of be good here. All right. Well, on that note, thank you again for listening live after the fact, whatever you happen to be. Please interact a little bit. As for me, Monday on Damn You Hollywood over on the W2M family of YouTube and Facebook and whatnot, Twitch, I think too. We will be reviewing Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. That's going to be me, Mark, and Jason. Last week Mark and I reviewed Project Hail Mary. What a breath of fresh air to talk about a good movie for a change. So we will be tackling Ready or Not 2. I very much enjoyed the first Ready or Not, so sequel seems okay. I'll see it tomorrow before we review it, so tune in for that. Do I have any other podcasts this week? I occasionally have more going on. I don't think I do this week. Because, yeah, this is not me. Yeah, it's not me. Yeah, okay. Then WWE SmackDown on Friday, of course, and UFC Moicano versus Duncan on Saturday. God help me, I am wasting my life. Yeah, it's not pretty, and I shouldn't be doing it, but I should be getting paid more. Sorry, I hate to bring that up again. That card is just so bad. It's just so bad. All right. Yeah. Next, and then of course we will be back here Saturday evening / very very early Monday morning, depending on your time zone. We will review the Moicano and Duncan card. We'll do the old post mortem, and next week we will preview UFC 327. This is a good card. 2 title fights were headlined by Yuri Prochazka and Carlos Ulberg for the vacant light heavyweight belt. Joshua Van against Tatsuro Taira. They're in Miami. Curtis Blades and Josh Hokett. Dominic Reyes and Johnny Walker. At least that'll be funny. Azamat Mirzakhanov and Paulo Costa. That'll be funny because Paulo Costa losing that will be hilarious. Pitbull and Pico. Cub Swanson's back in action. Mateusz Gamrot and Esteban Gribovic. It's a good card. Like this one this week, terrible. The whiplash going from this awful, from like what we had yesterday, which was actually pretty good, to this awfulness, back to something really good is we're way up and down here. But we'll give that a full preview next week. So I hope you all come back again live or after the fact. I appreciate the heck out of you. Yeah, I will see you all then. Until next time, as always, thank you. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave. See ya.